Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the misty fields of ancient Peru. You trudge barefoot across damp earth, mist curling around your ankles like sleepy serpents. Towering maize plants sway gently in the pre-dawn hush, their thick leaves slick with dew that beads and drops, heavy as tiny silver coins. The air is cool, carrying the ghostly scent of wet soil and something older, something sacred. You breathe it in, trying not to shiver. You've got a job to do. This isn't just corn you're gathering, it's the soul of your community's most precious ritual, chicha. A drink so important it decided feasts, wars, marriages, and maybe even who would live to tell the tale. You probably won't survive on your first batch alone. It takes an entire village, and more patience than a llama stuck in traffic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not post where you're tuning in from, and your local time? Always curious to know who's out there in the dark with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach out, fingers brushing the fat, golden kernels of the maize, known here as maize, plump and glistening, almost too perfect to pluck. But pluck you do, because this is no ordinary morning. This is the start of a brewing cycle that will take days, sometimes weeks. And it must begin in this exact way, reverently, almost like a prayer stitched together with calloused hands. You work in silence, the only sound the soft rustle of stalks and the occasional squelch of mud underfoot. Somewhere distant, a rooster belts out a croaky crow, impatient for the sun. You almost laugh. It's always the rooster who thinks he's king of the morning, not the people who make chicha. Corn in ancient Peru isn't just food, it's life. It's power. Historians still argue whether it was first cultivated specifically for brewing or eating. Honestly, who's to say what the original plan was when your ancestors first looked at a field of grass and thought, let's make something intoxicating. Each cob you pick is thick and squat, nothing like the long, streamlined corn in your local supermarket today. This stuff looks rugged, built to withstand high altitudes and the occasional grumpy alpaca. You cradle the ears gently, filling your woven basket until it strains against its fibers. As the first pink streaks of dawn claw up the sky, you hoist the basket onto your hip. It's heavy, but manageable. Ahead, other figures loom, women mostly, bustling silently with their own loads of maize, their breath misting in the cool air. The morning is so still you can hear the mountains creaking, or maybe that's your knees, hard to tell. The Andes loom in the distance, their peaks hidden by low clouds, ancient and unmoved by your small, important task. You follow the others back down a narrow, dusty path to the village. It's a huddle of adobe houses with thatched roofs, smoke beginning to curl from some chimneys. There's a sleepy order to it all. Everyone knows their part in the great choreography of chicha making. You pass a hut where a woman is grinding dried chili peppers for a different batch of stew, their sharp scent tickling your nose. Not for chicha, though. No, your brew must be pure. Maize, water, patience, and, well, something extra, but we'll get to that. Under a low awning, you deposit your basket with a grunt. The sun's coming up properly now, painting everything gold and waking up the flies. A few buzz insistently around the maize, daring you to slap at them and ruin the sacred mood. You resist. Barely. Nearby, old Juana is already peeling back the husks with practiced flicks of her fingers, piling the glossy kernels into a vast, shallow bowl carved from some enormous gourd. You sit beside her, legs crossed, and join in. Each kernel you strip feels like a small treasure, slick and firm. You try not to think about the next step. It's a little gross if you dwell on it. Juana catches your eye and winks. She knows. In another hour, you'll move on to chewing. Yes, chewing. Because saliva contains enzymes that help break down the starches in the maize, kick-starting the fermentation process. No giant brewing kettles, no sophisticated equipment, just your own mouth, doing what it does best. Historians still debate how the practice started. Was it accidental? Some say a lazy farmer chewed corn, spat it out, forgot about it, and came back to find it bubbling mysteriously. Others suggest it was a deliberate act, maybe inspired by the way fruit ferments on its own. Either way, you're part of a tradition older than most modern nations, older even than some myths your grandmother half remembers. You lean into it, losing yourself in the rhythm of it all. Pluck, strip, chew, spit, repeat. The day grows hotter, and the sharp smell of damp corn hangs heavy in the air. Somewhere, someone starts humming a tune that sounds older than the hills. You hum along, feeling the past and present blur. And you haven't even gotten to the brewing yet. You settle into the low circle of villagers, knees knocking and baskets brimming, and brace yourself for what's next. Chewing. Not dainty little nibbles either. This is industrial-grade mastication, a whole village worth of jaw power about to turn humble corn into liquid gold. You pick up a handful of kernels, smooth and gleaming in the morning sun, and pop them into your mouth. The first crunch is sweet, slightly grassy, a whisper of the fields you left behind. You chew methodically, letting your saliva soak and work its magic. If this sounds gross to you, well, it should. But in your world, this is chemistry, ritual, and survival all in one. Beside you, Juana is already a pro, working through her kernels with a kind of serene detachment. She spits expertly into a woven tray lined with broad, clean leaves. You follow suit, feeling the half-chewed mash plop wetly onto the leaf, satisfying, in a weird, slightly unappetizing way. If you're squeamish, this is where you bow out. But not you. You lean in. See, the enzymes in your saliva, particularly amylase, are key here. They break down the complex starches in the corn into fermentable sugars. Historians still argue whether chewing was the first and only method ancient Peruvians used, or if there were early experiments with germination too. Either way, you and your companions are knee-deep in a tradition that's part cooking, part biology, part stubborn human ingenuity. You glance around the circle. It's not just older women, there are young ones, teens, and a few wiry old men who chew with a slow, thoughtful rhythm, as if pondering something profound. Maybe they are. Maybe they're thinking about that one festival when the chicha was so strong it made the llamas dance, or maybe they're wondering what's for lunch. As the morning heats up, the air fills with a pungent, earthy smell, something between wet grain and wood smoke. It clings to your hair, your skin, your very soul. You'll smell like this for days, and honestly, that's part of the charm. There's a quiet camaraderie in the chewing circle. You don't talk much, too busy working, but there are glances, grins, and the occasional elbow jab when someone coughs dramatically from trying to chew too fast. The young ones sometimes try to sneak a kernel into someone else's pile just to be cheeky. A few light chuckles ripple around, lazy and warm. Every so often, someone gathers up a full tray of mashed corn and carries it to a shaded platform where the mash will dry slightly before the next stage. You stretch your back and jaw, both of which are starting to protest. Chewing corn is not for the faint of heart, or the faint of mandible. A little further off, you spot a dog lurking, tongue lolling, eyeing the proceedings with the patience of an opportunist. Dogs, as it turns out, have always been part of the brewing landscape, lurking, begging, and occasionally, if the brewer's distracted, stealing a mouthful of the fermenting mash. Some believe a lucky dog sighting guarantees a good brew. Others claim it's a bad omen. Historians still argue about the role of animals in ancient brewing superstitions, but you're pretty sure the dog is just hungry. By midday, your jaws ache like you've chewed through a tree trunk, and your spit reserves are running low. Mercifully, this part doesn't last forever. The chewed mash is left to rest, a step that's crucial for letting natural yeasts begin to colonize the sugary pulp. Now it's time for a short break. You wipe your hands on your tunic, already stained and a little stiff with old corn juice, and wander toward a hut where someone's roasting potatoes in the ashes of a dying fire. You snag one, blow on it, and bite into its steaming heart. It's simple, perfect fuel for what's still ahead. You lean against a sun-warmed wall, munching slowly, and let your mind wander. Brewing chicha isn't just about the process, it's about what it means. Births, weddings, harvests, funerals, even wars, chicha accompanies them all. It's the drink of the living and the dead, a liquid thread that stitches the community together across generations. Somewhere nearby, a flute trills a lazy tune, looping and spiraling into the cloudless sky. You let the sound wrap around you like a blanket. For a moment, the world feels very small, very manageable. But you can't stay idle for long. Juana claps her hands, calling everyone back to the task. The mash must be mixed with water soon, heated, stirred, and coaxed toward its final destiny. You sigh, shove the last of your potato into your mouth, and return to the circle. The trays of chewed corn gleam in the sun, sticky and glistening. The hardest part of the day is over, but the real alchemy is only just beginning. You roll your shoulders, square your jaw, and get ready to build fires, heft heavy pots, and stand long hours stirring the future into existence. Because you're not just brewing a drink, you're brewing memories. The afternoon sun glares down, turning the air thick and slow, but you've no time to wilt under it. Around you, the village is alive with purpose. Smoke begins to thread into the sky, thin and pale at first, then thicker as the fires catch. You follow the others to the stone-lined pits where the real work happens, brewing. The stone pots are massive, belly-wide and soot-streaked, each one as old as the tales told around their fires. Some say these pots are heirlooms, passed down through generations, their surfaces whispering memories into each batch of chicha. Historians still debate whether such brewing vessels were considered sacred or just practical, but standing here now, with the heavy, cracked clay warming under your palms, you're inclined to think sacred feels right. You kneel beside one pot, cradling a handful of the chewed corn mash. It's sticky, sour-sweet, already carrying the faintest tang of fermentation. Carefully, you ladle it into the pot, mixing it with water fetched earlier from the stream, the good stream, not the one near the llamas, for obvious reasons. The fire is already crackling, fed with twisted branches and scraps of dried dung, an odor you think you'll never get used to no matter how many seasons you spend brewing. You feed more fuel into the flames, coaxing them higher, feeling the heat kiss your face and arms. As the pot heats, you stir with a paddle almost as tall as you are, a polished stick worn smooth by years of brewing. You keep the mixture moving, careful not to let it scorch. A burnt batch is not just a waste, it's a humiliation. You remember last year when old Mateo nodded off during stirring and ruined an entire vat. The laughter echoed for weeks, and his nickname, burnt corn, still sticks. You stir, sweat pooling at your temples, the brew sloshing and burbling with a thick, sleepy sound. It's hypnotic, and you fall into the rhythm, dip, swirl, scrape the bottom, lift. The scent changes as the mash cooks, deepening into something richer, meatier, like wet bread left in the sun. A few children drift over, curious, sniffing the air and daring each other to get closer. You wag a finger at them, mock stern, and they scatter, giggling. No one wants to be the one who spills a pot or, worse, gets their fingers slapped by one. The fires crackle, the pots bubble, and the sun dips low. Your arms ache from stirring, but you dare not stop. Even now, as you peer into the murky depths, you can see the brew changing, thickening, beginning its slow, inevitable journey toward drinkability. Nearby, someone adds herbs to their pot, wild mint, maybe, or muna, a practice some swear by, and others scoff at. Historians still argue whether flavoring chicha was traditional or a later innovation. You figure if it tastes good and the gods don't strike you down, it's fair game. At some point, one nudges your elbow and nods toward your pot. It's time. You fetch a worn gourd ladle and scoop a bit of the mixture into a smaller vessel, where it will cool and continue fermenting. The pots are left to bubble a little longer, then banked with embers so they cool slowly, soaking up the last whispers of heat. You sit back on your haunches, panting a little, feeling the day's labor in your bones. You wipe your hands on your tunic, smearing a paste of corn and ash across the fabric, and stretch your sore legs. The brewing fires hiss and sigh as the last logs collapse into red coals. Your pot sits heavy and silent now, the brew inside still swirling lazily with its own hidden life. But brewing chicha isn't just about chewing and boiling, you have to get the water right. And not just any water. You stand, stretching your aching back, and grab a clay jug. It's time to make the trek to the spring. The one tucked away where the rocks are slick with moss and the water tastes like melted snow. There are closer sources, sure, but you wouldn't dream of using them. Only the purest water will do, as everyone here knows. Even the llamas seem to avoid fouling that particular patch of earth, and llamas are not known for their manners. The path is steep, winding up into the foothills. Your breath hitches as you climb, the jug bouncing lightly against your hip. The air cools the higher you go, carrying the crisp tang of pine resin and distant rainstorms. By the time you reach the spring, your thighs are burning and your mouth is dry. The water seeps from between a cleft in the rocks, trickling down into a clear pool no bigger than a large cooking pot. You kneel carefully, mindful not to kick up mud, and lower your jug into the water. It fills with a satisfying glug-glug, the coldness biting at your fingers. You pause to splash some on your face. It's shockingly cold, and you suck in a breath between your teeth, but it wakes you up, sharp and clean. Historians still argue whether the reverence for particular water sources was purely practical or had spiritual roots. Standing here, watching the sun glint off the mirror-smooth surface, you're pretty sure it's both. With your jug full, You start the slow trek back down. You tread carefully. Spilling even a few drops would feel like an insult to the spring and a waste of the thigh workout you just endured. Back at the village, you arrive just as Juana is checking the pots. She dips a gourd in and sniffs the surface. Her wrinkled face remains unreadable for a long moment, then she grunts in satisfaction. You catch her eye and hold up your jug. She nods approvingly. Good water is half the battle won. You pour it carefully into the fermenting vessel where your cooling brew waits. It swirls and melts, the surface darkening, growing cloudier. There's something mesmerizing about it, the way the mixture shifts and dances in the fading light. As the evening slides in, the village begins to quiet. The day's heat lifts, replaced by the chill that always sneaks down from the mountains after sunset. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and settle near your pot, keeping an eye on it as it cools. A few others gather nearby, and someone pulls out a flute, its lilting melody floating out into the deepening dusk. It's a tune you know well, a song of harvests and homecomings. You hum along under your breath, feeling the notes settle into your bones like the night itself. There's an art to chicha that goes beyond ingredients and technique. It's about timing, patience, respect for the maize, the water, the fire, the invisible yeasts that do their slow, magical work. You can't rush it. You can't force it. You can only coax and wait. And so you wait. The stars come out, sharp and brilliant in the high, clean air. You lean back, gaze up, and let the sky pull you in. Maybe this is why the ancient brewers always looked to the heavens. Maybe they understood that what you do with your hands is only part of the story, and the rest is written in the stars. You wake in the thin gray light of early morning, back stiff from sleeping on the hard-packed earth, your shawl tangled around you like an argument you lost in your sleep. The air smells of ash and corn, familiar and oddly comforting. Around you, other brewers are stirring too, rubbing sleep from their eyes and poking at the dying embers of last night's fires. Today's task is more complicated, more celestial. You stretch, yawn, and squint up at the sky. Clear. Good. Because brewing chicha isn't just about ingredients, it's about timing. And not the kind you track with sundials or water clocks. No, you have to consult the moon and the stars, that great cosmic calendar painted across the night. You shuffle toward the center of the village where Juana is already setting up, her sharp eyes on the western horizon. Others gather too, old men with skin like bark, girls with long braids, toddlers clinging to skirts and shawls. Everyone turns their faces to the sky. The moon hangs low and fat, just past full. Perfect. Not too young, not too old. In this phase, it's said the brew will ferment strong but not wild, mellow but not weak. Historians still argue whether aligning chicha brewing with lunar cycles was superstition or a clever understanding of yeast activity. You figure it's both, like most good traditions. But it's not just the moon you're watching. Certain constellations are creeping toward their seasonal thrones, bright Orion climbing higher, and the Southern Cross tilting just so. When they reach the right place in the sky, it's said the chicha will carry not just flavor, but fortune. Juana nods, satisfied. She raises her hand, a signal, and the murmuring crowd falls silent. Then, slowly, deliberately, she kneels beside her pot, scoops a gourdful of the still-cooling brew, and raises it to the sky. You follow suit, your own gourd trembling a little in your hands. You can feel the weight of the moment pressing against your ribs. It's not that you believe the stars will curse your brew if you skip this step, but are you really willing to find out? You tip the gourd slightly, letting a thin stream trickle onto the earth. A libation. An offering. The ground soaks it up eagerly, as if the world itself is thirsty. You murmur the traditional words under your breath. They tumble out in the old language, syllables heavy with dust and time. You don't know exactly what they mean, no one does. Not anymore, but you know how they feel in your mouth, right? There's a pause, a collective holding of breath. Then Juana lowers her gourd, and so do you. Around the circle, people begin to smile, small and quiet. It's done. You've asked the heavens to bless your brew, and now it's up to the east, and maybe a little luck. As the sun edges over the mountains, you set your gourd aside and check the fermenting pot. The mixture inside is cloudy, thick, and starting to bubble faintly. The scent has changed again, deeper now, richer, with a sharpness that tingles your nose. You skim the surface with a wooden paddle, watching the bubbles dance and pop. If all goes well, this batch will be ready for drinking in a few days, though some brewers prefer to wait longer, letting the flavors deepen and the alcohol content climb. Somewhere, a rooster crows, late, confused, probably hungover from yesterday's festivities, and you chuckle under your breath. The sound is quickly swallowed by the village's morning hum, women grinding maize, children chasing each other through the dust, men repairing tools and nets. But for you, today is a day of waiting and watching. You'll tend the brew, stirring it occasionally, guarding it from dust and flies and curious animals. You'll sniff and taste, not too much, just enough to know when it's ready. You settle beside your pot, pull your shawl tighter, and glance back up at the sky. The moon is fading now, washed out by the sun's rising glare. The stars have slipped away, their work done for another night. And here you are, one small brewer under one enormous sky, trusting that somewhere in the slow alchemy of corn and water and time, something magical is quietly unfolding. You sit cross-legged by your pot, idly tracing shapes in the dust while the chicha hums along at its own slow tempo. You stir occasionally, careful and gentle, no splashing, no sudden movements. Brewing is half patience, half prayer, and the rest, well, it's a kind of muscle memory, the knowledge folded into your hands by those who brewed before you. But today is no ordinary brew day. Today you're not just making enough chicha for the evening meal or a lazy afternoon gathering. No, you're brewing for the festival, and that means big batches. The pot in front of you is just a start. You glance across the village square and see vats, barrels, enormous stone troughs, anything that can hold fermenting chicha, lined up like silent sentinels. It's said that during festivals, the village drinks so much chicha that even the ground gets tipsy. Historians still argue about the scale of these celebrations. Were they intimate gatherings or full-blown bacchanals that would make a modern music festival look like a tea party? You've seen both, depending on the season and the harvest. When times are good and the maize is fat and plentiful, the people brew enough chicha to float a canoe. When times are lean, the brew is thinner, more sour, but no less sacred. You rise and roll your shoulders, fetching a second gourd to start transferring your brew into a larger fermentation vat. It's a beast of a thing, carved from a single tree trunk hollowed out over decades of careful work, the inside worn smooth by generations of brewing. Its rim is polished by countless hands, and some say if you listen closely, you can hear the vat whispering secrets to the chicha. You ladle the steaming mixture carefully, trying not to think about how much more there is to move. A few others join you, their arms gleaming with sweat, their faces set in the determined grimace of people who know there's still a mountain of work ahead. The larger the batch, the longer the ferment, and the greater the chance of things going wrong. Too much heat and the brew will sour. Too cold and it'll sulk, refusing to bubble at all. Too many flies and, well, you'll end up with a flavor that's best described as agricultural. As you work, you hear Juana muttering to herself, counting under her breath. She's measuring time, temperature, the subtle signs that only experience can read, the thickness of the bubbles, the shift in the brew's scent. It's not math. It's not science. It's witchcraft, and she's the village's most respected brewer for a reason. You glance around. The village is beginning to transform. Poles are being raised, hung with bright woven banners that snap and flutter in the afternoon breeze. Children run by carrying baskets of flowers and strange, lumpy fruits. Dogs bark and chase them, tails wagging furiously. In one corner, a group of men are stringing up drums and flutes. The music will start tonight and will not stop for days. If you're lucky, you might even spot the old shaman dancing himself into a trance by the third sunrise, his feet stamping out a rhythm older than language itself. But for now, there's chicha to brew. You finish ladling your batch and wipe your forehead with a grimy sleeve. The fermentation vats are nearly full, their surfaces rippling faintly as they settle into their new homes. You murmur a quiet thanks to the corn, to the water, to the unseen forces that guide the process. You aren't alone in your gratitude. Across the square, others are whispering their own small prayers, offering handfuls of cornmeal to the earth, tying bits of red thread around the rims of their vats to ward off bad luck. Historians still argue about whether these gestures were truly religious or just habit, but honestly, does it matter? In a world as unpredictable as this one, a little superstition is just good insurance. The sun starts to dip low, bathing everything in honeyed light. You pause, gourd in hand, and take it all in, the bustle, the color, the smell of fermenting corn thick in the air. Tonight, the fires will be lit again, the drums will sound, and the first gourds of fresh chicha will be raised high under the stars. You'll drink, you'll dance, you'll lose yourself in the swirl of it all, and maybe, just maybe, you'll glimpse something eternal in the flicker of firelight on frothy brew. But that's later. For now, you set your gourd aside, flex your aching fingers, and smile. Because the vats are full, the brew is singing, and the festival is only just beginning to wake. You sit back on your heels, squinting at the rows of vats lined up like a makeshift army. But what hits you next isn't the sheer amount of brew, it's the color. Not all chicha looks the same. You reach for a nearby vat and skim the surface with your ladle. The liquid clings, a soft buttery yellow that catches the evening light. It's the most common shade, but not the only one. You move down the line, sampling without sipping, yet, and your eyes widen. Here, a pinkish hue, almost blushing like a shy guess. There, a batch so deep purple it looks like it could stain the stars themselves. Chicha isn't just one drink. It's many drinks, many moods. Historians still argue whether the colors were intentional or just happy accidents, the result of different maize varieties or rogue ingredients slipping into the mix. You've heard both arguments while sipping from gourds so colorful they could double as paint palettes. The yellow chicha comes from traditional white or yellow maize, what most brewers trust to be consistent and mild. But for special batches, you reach into memory, maize-kissed pink by a rare breed of corn, or deep red from kernels that shine like polished garnet. Some even claim that black maize, rare and moody, brews a chicha so potent and dark it's best served sparingly, and only to those with strong stomachs and stronger regrets. You run your fingers along the rim of one of the purple vats, the surface rippling slightly. This batch was likely enhanced with mulberries, tiny, peppery fruits that add not just color but a whisper of spice, a mischievous kick behind the sweet tang. Younger brewers nearby whisper excitedly about the newest trend, adding cactus fruit for a blushing pink chicha that's said to bring luck and love, or disaster, depending on who you ask. Historians still bicker whether these additions were rooted in old medicinal traditions or simply experimental party tricks. Either way, you appreciate the audacity. Of course, not every color is just for fun. Some chicha, tinted with sacred plants or rare herbs, is reserved for rituals, set aside in tall, narrow-necked vessels to steep in the dark, thickening into something dangerously close to a potion. You've seen it poured carefully over stone altars, trickling down in thin streams that seem to shimmer and vanish in the morning sun. You glance at your own vat, pale gold and steady, and smile. Maybe next year you'll be brave enough to aim for purple, or even dare the moody black maize. For now, though, there's pride in getting the basics right. As twilight deepens, the vats seem to glow from within, as if lit by the day's last, stubborn embers. The villagers gather again, crouched and whispering, some pointing out which batches are which, others already placing quiet bets on which one will taste best come morning. You can't help but grin. Sure, it's brewing, it's tradition, it's sacred, but it's also a competition, and has been for as long as anyone can remember. Friendly, mostly. Sometimes a little less so, depending on how strong the chicha ends up and how many gourds are passed around. As the first stars prick the sky, Juana walks by, hands clasped behind her back, surveying the vats like a general before a battle. She stops by your vat, dips a gourd in, lifts it to her nose, and inhales deeply. Then, a small, tight smile. You exhale. That's the closest thing to a gold star you'll get tonight. Around you, chatter picks up. Someone has brought out drums, their hollow thump a heartbeat that quickens as darkness spills over the village. Fires are kindled again, casting leaping shadows on the adobe walls. Women scatter flower petals in the dust, weaving paths between vats and sleeping dogs and gossiping elders. You stand, stretching arms sore from stirring, and glance one more time at the rainbow of brews. Yellow, pink, red, purple, a liquid festival waiting to happen. Each color a flavor, a mood, a promise. You tie a strip of cloth, your brewing mark, a kind of signature, around the neck of your vat and step back into the swelling tide of noise and movement. The vats will ferment overnight under the stars, breathing in the cool night air, transforming minute by minute. Tomorrow, they'll be ready. Tonight, though? Tonight is for watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, sneaking a taste. You wake to the smell of smoke and damp earth, the scent of an ancient party quietly marinating in the air. The chicha has spent the night under the stars, fermenting like a secret, but you know it's not done yet. No, not by a long shot. Today is when the magic really happens, the fine-tuning, the little tweaks that take a decent batch and make it unforgettable. You rise stiffly, brushing dust off your tunic, and join the others already crowding around the vats. This is the stage for the secret ingredients. Now, secret is a loose term around here. Everybody knows people add things to their chicha, but what exactly they add is a tightly guarded whisper passed down through families like an heirloom pot. You catch snatches of conversation, someone talking about wild mint, another boasting about their cousin's mysterious flower that blooms only once a year and supposedly makes chicha sing in your mouth. You peer into your vat. The surface quivers slightly when stirred, and the smell is sharp and promising. A good start, but you want more. You rummage through the little pouch tied at your waist and pull out a few sprigs of muna, the local mint. Its scent is fierce, almost medicinal, but it cools the brew and gives it a freshness that makes the first sip feel like diving into a cold mountain stream. You crush the leaves between your fingers, toss them into the vat, and stir, watching the green flecks swirl and vanish. Nearby, Juana is bent over her vat, sprinkling in what looks like crushed akira root, while others are adding marigold petals, orange and bright as little suns. Someone, bold, reckless, depending on who you ask, leans over their vat and drops in a handful of coca leaves. Historians still debate whether coca was a regular addition or something reserved for ceremonies or the extra long festivals where staying awake for 3 days was less a choice and more a survival tactic. You shrug and toss in a few marigold petals yourself. What's a little luck? And then there are the less orthodox additions. You hear someone whisper about guinea pig blood, for strength, they say, wrinkling their nose. Another boasts that their uncle once brewed a batch infused with snakeskin for protection. Most of this is probably gossip, but you've seen stranger things end up in a pot when no one was looking. Superstition, flavor, or a little of both? Hard to say. Historians argue endlessly about where culinary invention ends and ritual begins. You stir the pot gently, watching the mint and petals weave their way into the brew, and figure it's probably a tangled mess of the two. The air grows thick with the mingling smells of different brews, sharp, sweet, floral, sour. It's a heady perfume that makes you sway slightly where you stand, and not just from the early taste tests. Because of course, you have to taste. You dip a gourd into the brew and take a cautious sip. The first notes are bright and grassy, the mint trailing behind like a cool breeze. There's still the corn's hardiness underneath, a kind of chewy sweetness that feels grounding, ancient. You roll it around on your tongue, nodding slowly. Not bad. Not bad at all. A few others are doing the same, slurping noisily, smacking their lips, offering critiques nobody asked for. Someone nearby gags dramatically and earns a thump on the back in a round of laughter. You're mostly pleased with your batch, but there's always room for improvement. You consider slipping in a tiny bit of chancaca, a dark, sticky sugar made from raw cane, to round out the sharp edges. You fish a lump out of your pouch, toss it into the vat, and stir it in, watching as it melts and darkens the brew. Perfect. The sun is climbing now, and the heat is starting to bite. The chicha will continue to bubble and shift throughout the day, softening, melting, changing. By evening, it'll be ready for the first serious round of drinking and judging. You step back from your vat, arms crossed, a small smile on your lips. The brew glows faintly in the morning light, promising mischief, memory, maybe even a little magic. And you can't wait to see what it becomes once the sun dips low and the gourds start to pass from hand to hand. The afternoon air hangs heavy, vibrating with the low drone of insects and the occasional bark of a dog too lazy to chase its own tail. Your chicha is ready, or nearly there, and now comes the part that feels less like brewing and more like bargaining with unseen forces. The first tasting isn't for you. Not yet. No, before anyone drinks, before even the first cautious gourd is tilted to lips, an offering must be made. A serious offering. You ladle out a portion of the brew into a large gourd, bigger than your head and polished smooth from years of ceremonies. It smells rich and alive, almost pulsing with the weight of everything you've poured into it, sweat, prayer, a little mint, and more hope than you'd ever admit out loud. You carry the gourd carefully to the center of the square where a rough stone slab waits, pocked and weathered from countless seasons of offerings. You kneel down, ignoring the ache in your knees, and set the gourd gently on the slab. The others gather, some solemn, others fidgeting like they can already taste the brew on their tongues. Juana steps forward, a bundle of coca leaves in one hand, and places them beside your gourd. She looks at you expectantly. You know what to do. You dip your fingers into the gourd and flick a few drops onto the ground, first to the north, then south, east, and west. A quiet, simple gesture, but one thick with meaning. You're offering to the earth, the mountains, the sun, the unseen spirits that spin the world on their invisible axis. Without their blessing, all you've made is corn soup with dreams. Historians still argue whether these pre-drinking offerings were holdovers from even older rituals, long before the Inca ever rose to power, or if they were a uniquely Incan invention. You suspect it's one of those things no one will ever be sure about, much like why roosters always sound like they're shouting secrets at dawn. You whisper a few words, ancient, cracked, but still powerful, and tip the gourd slowly, letting a thin stream of chicha spill onto the stone. It darkens, pooling into the cracks and channels worn into the surface. Some of it trickles down to the earth below, sinking into the dust. A murmur ripples through the crowd. It's done. The offering is made. The first sip is now blessed. You stand and lift the gourd high for all to see. The sunlight catches the liquid's surface, making it shimmer like liquid amber. A few people cheer quietly, most just nod, their eyes bright. And now, finally, it's your turn. You bring the gourd to your lips, the rim cool and smooth. You take a slow sip, letting the brew sit heavy on your tongue. It's tart at first, sharp with the fresh tang of fermentation. Then the mint sneaks in, cooling the back of your throat, and the earthiness of the corn settles everything down, grounding it in something as old as the hills. You lower the gourd and smack your lips thoughtfully. Not bad. Not bad at all. You pass the gourd to Juana, who sips, nods approvingly, and passes it on. The gourd makes its way through the crowd, each person sipping, smacking, sometimes grinning, sometimes grimacing. It's a strong batch, no doubt about it. Around you, more gourds are filled and pass. The chicha flows, and with it, the conversation. Old grievances soften. Jokes sharpen. Stories grow taller and funnier with each retelling. Historians still debate whether chicha was a social lubricant or a sacred bridge between people and gods. You figure, from the way old rivals are chuckling together and teenagers are daring each other to guzzle more than they should, it's both. You sit back, sipping slowly, feeling the buzz settle into your limbs, soft and golden. The earth feels closer, warmer, as if the mountains themselves are leaning in to hear the laughter. The gourd comes back around to you. You sip again, deeper this time, and close your eyes, tasting not just the brew but the work, the waiting, the quiet blessings of a world that moves slower and older than you'll ever really understand. Somewhere, someone starts up a drumbeat, low and steady. A flute joins in, sweet and high, like a bird stitching the sky together with sound. The music wraps around you, threads through the smoke, the laughter, the rising night. The first tasting is over. The real celebration is just beginning. By midday, you're slouched under the woven roof of a chicheria, your fingers loose around a gourd that feels suspiciously lighter than you remember. You shift, trying to shake off the comfortable numbness pooling in your joints, but honestly, you're not trying that hard. The chicheria is nothing more than 4 posts and a sloped roof of dried reeds, a place for shade, for gossip, and for the steady, rhythmic passing of gourds hand to hand. These little roadside havens pop up wherever there's enough brew to share and enough news to trade, and the rules are simple. Sit, sip, and spill secrets, stories, and sometimes your dignity. You glance around. The place is already humming with life. A dog sleeps in the dust, twitching at dream-chased rabbits. 2 women are deep in a conversation, heads bowed so close their braids intertwine. In the corner, a trio of old men, faces carved by sun and time, argue about the best way to chew corn for brewing, each claiming their jaw strength is the true secret ingredient. You sip your chicha, tart, a little grassy, a little smoky, and let it rest on your tongue. It's not your batch, but it's good. Really good. Probably Juana's, judging by the bright herbal note that lingers long after the sip is gone. Across from you, a boy not much older than 15 makes a face after a hearty gulp. He's at that dangerous age, young enough to think he's invincible, old enough to know just enough about drinking to get himself into trouble. You hide a smile behind your gourd. The gossip swirls thicker than the smoke from the nearby fire pit. Who's marrying whom? Whose maize field is thriving suspiciously well this year? Whether the new chicheria 2 hills over is secretly watering down their brew, sacrilege of the highest order. Historians still argue whether chicherias were informal gathering spots or more organized social hubs, but sitting here, gourd in hand, you can tell these places are the true heartbeat of the community. Deals are struck, rivalries kindled or cooled, and news travels faster here than even the quickest runner. The chicha helps, of course. It oils the conversation, loosens tongues, softens grudges. You sip again, feeling it warm you from the inside out, and let yourself sink deeper into the buzz of it all. At the edge of the shelter, someone is sketching shapes in the dirt with a stick, explaining the intricacies of llama breeding to a group that's paying just enough attention to nod in unison. A young woman strings beads onto a thread, her hands quick and sure even as she argues, good-naturedly, with her neighbor about the best time to plant potatoes. It's not a rowdy place, not yet. That'll come later when the gourds are emptier and the shadows longer. For now, there's a lazy rhythm to it, like a river winding slowly toward the sea. You lean back, tipping your gourd to get the last few drops, and sigh. This is what chicha does. It brings you here, slows the world down to a manageable hum, makes the air thick with laughter and the kind of gossip that's 40% truth, 60% embellishment, and 100% essential. Someone pushes a new, full gourd into your hand, no words, just a grin and a nod. You raise it in thanks and take another sip. This batch is sweeter, with a hint of something floral. Maybe wakate? You make a mental note to ask around later, if you remember. The sun crawls higher, the chicha flows easier, and you find yourself caught in a story about a man who once brewed a batch so strong it sent him sleepwalking halfway to the next village, still clutching his gourd. You laugh, you drink, you listen. The day stretches out lazy and golden, and the chicheria hums on, a simple roof over a world spun together with corn, water, patience, and the easy, sticky warmth of old stories retold for the 1000th time, and somehow still funny. You slump deeper into the warm blanket of afternoon, the gourd in your hand warming with the sluggish heat. The chicheria buzzes low and constant around you, but out of the corner of your eye, you notice a different sort of gathering taking shape by the edge of the square. Not villagers, not gossips, warriors. Lean, wiry men with faces like chiseled stone and eyes that have seen too many sunrises from mountaintops. Their tunics are simple, their sandals dusty, but the way they carry themselves, shoulders back, jaws set, you don't need a badge to know who they are. The warriors don't drink the same brew as you. No, for them, chicha isn't just a pastime or a social glue. It's fuel. You stand, curiosity nudging you forward, and wander over. Their vats are smaller, darker, the brew inside thicker, almost syrupy. You can smell it before you even get close, a dense, sharp tang that cuts through the softer sweetness of the festival chicha like a blade through maize husks. You watch as one of them ladles out a serving. The chicha glugs thickly into a heavy, round-bottomed gourd, the kind meant for serious business. The warrior lifts it, mutters something under his breath, and downs the entire thing in 3 steady gulps. You wince. He barely blinks. This is war chicha, brewed thicker, fermented longer, fortified with special ingredients meant to harden the body and the will. Some say it's brewed with bitter herbs, maybe even crushed bones, though that part's probably more scare tactic than reality. Historians still argue whether the warriors' chicha recipes were designed purely for strength or if they carried spiritual significance, infusing the drinker with the essence of the earth, the ancestors, the mountain gods themselves. You lean in closer and catch a whiff, strong, almost metallic, with an undertone that makes your stomach flip. You're not sure if it's respect or nausea. The warriors don't laugh and gossip like the chicheria crowd. They murmur in low voices, make plans you're not invited to hear. Occasionally one of them glances up at the mountains with a kind of fierce longing, like they'd rather be out there, blades in hand, than here, sipping brew under a lazy sun. You inch closer, trying to be inconspicuous, but of course, you aren't. One of the warriors, the youngest, judging by his still intact front teeth, catches your eye and smirks. He dips his ladle and thrusts the gourd toward you. A test. You take it, because saying no would be worse than drinking. The gourd is heavy, and the brew inside sloshes thickly, stubbornly clinging to the sides. You lift it to your lips and sip. It's intense. Like drinking smoke and stone and something wild that refuses to be tamed. It hits the back of your throat with a bite, then spreads, a firework blooming low and slow in your gut. Your vision tightens, then loosens, and you have to blink a few times to steady yourself. The young warrior laughs, just once, a short bark of amusement, and claps you on the shoulder hard enough to make you stagger. You hand the gourd back with as much dignity as you can muster. They return to their quiet conference, and you back away, head buzzing, not entirely sure your legs are working the way they're supposed to. You wander back toward the chicheria, where the air is lighter, the chicha gentler, and the worst consequence of a deep sip is telling an embarrassing story or two. You glance back once. The warriors are still there, drinking their dark brew, plotting whatever it is warriors plot. You wonder if the chicha makes them braver, stronger, or just a little more willing to stare down a spear without blinking. Maybe all three. You slump into your spot under the reed roof again and take a cautious sip from your old, friendly gourd. Much better. The chicha for warriors is for a different kind of soul, a soul built for battle, for scars, for songs sung around fires that burn only for the fallen. You're more of a gossip and nap type, personally. And besides, someone nearby is retelling the story about the man who tried to woo a girl by brewing pink chicha and ended up accidentally dyeing his face for a week. Now that's a war story you can get behind. The sun has slipped lower, shadows stretching across the village like lazy cats, and the pace of the festival shifts. Slower, more deliberate. You see people carrying bundles of flowers and candles, moving in small, quiet groups toward the outskirts where the land slopes gently toward the graves. Tonight isn't just for the living. You stand, brushing dust off your tunic, and follow. The gourd in your hand feels lighter, but you carry it carefully, respectfully. Death, here, isn't something hidden or hurried past. It's woven into the daily life of the village, stitched into every song, every story, every sip of chicha. And tonight, as the stars begin to blink awake, you'll share your brew with those who can no longer lift a gourd themselves. The cemetery isn't marked with headstones or iron fences, just low mounds, scattered offerings, and stones stacked with a carefulness that says, "We remember you." You find your family's spot easily, your feet tracing the familiar path without needing to think. You kneel, the earth still warm from the day, and set your gourd down. Around you, others are doing the same, spreading flowers, lighting candles that sputter and dance in the evening breeze. It's quiet, except for the soft murmur of prayers and the low rustle of cloth against earth. You pour a small stream of chicha onto the ground, watching it sink into the dust. The scent rises, sharp, yeasty, alive, and you close your eyes. A sip for you. A pour for them. You whisper names under your breath, names worn smooth by time, by love, by loss. Names that taste familiar and strange all at once. You offer them the chicha you've brewed with your hands, your breath, your sweat. You offer it like a bridge thrown across a chasm you can't otherwise cross. Historians still argue whether these libations were meant to feed the spirits or simply honor them. You figure, kneeling here with your hands sticky from spilled brew and your throat tight with unspoken words, it's both. You glance to the side and see a little boy, probably no more than 5, solemnly pouring his gourd out with both hands, tongue stuck out in concentration. His mother kneels behind him, murmuring a prayer, her hands steady on his back. He's learning. Just like you learned. The stars multiply, scattering across the sky like spilled maize kernels. The village glows behind you, firelight and laughter threading through the dark, but here, at the graves, the world holds its breath. You sit back on your heels and sip from your gourd, tasting the life that thrums stubbornly in the brew. The chicha for the dead isn't stronger or sweeter than what the living drink. It's just shared differently, with silence, with memory, with a quiet understanding that tonight, the world is wide enough for both sides of the veil. The candles flicker and gutter, their flames bowing to the first real breeze of the night. You pull your shawl tighter and pour another offering, letting the brew seep into the earth where your ancestors sleep. Somewhere far off, a drum starts again, slow and steady. Not the frantic beat of festival dancing, but something softer, more deliberate, a heartbeat for the night itself. You stay a little longer, gourd cradled in your lap, until the candles have burned low and the stars feel close enough to touch. When you finally rise and turn back toward the village, you walk carefully, each step deliberate, as if the earth itself were listening. And maybe it is. You trudge back toward the village, the gourd now empty, swinging lightly from your fingertips. The fires ahead crackle and leap, throwing shifting halos of light onto the adobe walls. The chichirya buzzes louder than before, and someone's already started a clumsy, sprawling dance near the drums. But you don't head back there, not yet. Instead, you follow a smaller, quieter path winding up toward the larger houses on the hill, the kind with multiple courtyards and walls smooth as polished bone. That's where the real chicha flows tonight, the batch reserved not for you or the gossiping villagers, but for royalty. The Inca elite don't drink the common brew. Oh no! For them, chicha is practically a diplomatic tool, a liquid bribe, a sacred trust. Brewing for the emperor, or even a high-ranking noble, is a task given only to the best, and even then, it's a job heavy enough to make your knees tremble. You've never brewed for the emperor, not directly. But Juana has. Once, years ago. She doesn't talk about it much, but when she does, her voice drops and her hands fidget with the edge of her shawl like she's recalling a storm she barely survived. You slip into the shadow of a wall and watch as two Aklas, the chosen women, the virgins of the sun, carry enormous, decorated jars toward the royal compound. The jars are roped with gold thread, and the women's faces are set in expressions of such deadly seriousness that even the boldest drunkard wouldn't dare joke. The chicha they carry is brewed under conditions stricter than 100 old grandmothers glaring over your shoulder. The water must be pristine, the maize must be perfect, and the brewers, always women, always Aklas, must be pure, not just in body but in spirit. Historians still argue whether this purity was more symbolic than literal. Some suggest it was about aligning the chicha with the sacred, keeping it free from anything that might offend the gods or the emperor. Others hint that it was about control, keeping the recipe and the process locked tightly in the hands of the state. Whatever the reason, it's clear that what's in those jars isn't just drink. It's power, distilled into frothy, golden liquid. You inch closer, careful not to be noticed, and catch a whiff of the royal brew. It smells sweeter, richer than anything you've sipped tonight, with a heady undertone that makes you think of ripe fruit left too long in the sun, dangerous, alluring. You can almost imagine the emperor sitting in a grand hall, stone walls hung with bright woven cloth, sipping from a gold gourd while courtiers hover nervously, waiting for the twitch of an eyebrow, the nod of approval that could make or break fortunes. And it's not just for drinking. Chicha at the highest levels is an offering, a gift, a weapon if need be. Treaties are sealed with it. Wars are waged over insults involving it. The right gourd, lifted at the right moment, can topple a kingdom or bind it closer than blood. You step back, letting the Aklas pass by in silence, their steps sure and even on the rough stone path. The guards at the compound gates nod once and admit them without a word. The jars disappear into the darkness beyond. You shiver a little, not from cold, but from the sheer gravity of it all. Your own brewing feels simple in comparison, maize, water, spit, fire. But up there, in the cool shadows of the royal halls, chicha is alchemy of a different kind. You wonder, just for a moment, what it would be like to have your brew judged by an emperor, to have your hands work tasted by someone who sees himself as the literal child of the sun. Terrifying, probably. Exhilarating, maybe. But then you hear the roar of laughter drifting up from the chicheria, the thump of the drums, the swirl of life that's messier and louder and warmer than anything gold-threaded and quiet. You grin, turn on your heel, and head back down the hill, the earth soft under your feet and the stars winking overhead like they're in on some joke you'll never fully understand. Royal chicha can keep its gold jars. You've got a date with a gourd, a gossip, and a story that's only getting better the more it's told. The drums are louder now, a heartbeat you can feel through the soles of your feet as you weave your way back to the chicheria. But you don't stop there, you veer toward a quieter corner of the village, drawn by the soft shuffle of sandals on packed dirt and the flicker of torchlight against high adobe walls. It's the Aklawasi, the house of the chosen women. You slow your steps, instinctively lowering your head. No one speaks above a whisper here. Even the air feels different, cooler, sharper, like the house itself breathes a different kind of air than the rest of the village. Inside those walls, the Aklas work tirelessly, brewing chicha so pure, so revered, it's almost a sin to think of it as a drink. It's an offering, a prayer made liquid. The women inside were chosen young, plucked from villages across the empire for their beauty, intelligence, and skill. To brew in the Aklawasi is a kind of sacred service, half honor, half life sentence. Historians still argue whether the Aklas lived lives of privilege or captivity. Some say they were treated like nobility, weaving fine cloth and preparing sacred foods, their every need tended to. Others claim they lived like prisoners behind those smooth, impenetrable walls, their days a rigid dance of duty and devotion. You press closer to the shadow of the wall, listening. Inside, you can hear the low murmur of voices, the occasional clink of a clay pot, the splash of water. No laughter. No gossip. The Aklas don't brew chicha the way you do, with clumsy jokes and the occasional elbow nudge. Their work is silent, methodical, almost ritualistic. The maize they use is different too, special varieties grown on terraces kissed only by the first and last rays of the sun, watered by streams considered sacred. Even the water is carefully drawn and filtered, handled with such reverence you'd think it could shatter at a harsh word. And the brewing? It's done under strict watch, each step inspected and measured by elder women who know every trick, every shortcut, and accept exactly none of them. The chewing is still there, of course it is, but even that is done in silence, the chewed maize laid out in precise rows to dry under linens fine enough to make a merchant weep. You can imagine it, the rows of young women, their hands moving in perfect synchronicity, the soft rustle of cloth, the slow, steady building of a brew not just meant to please the emperor, but the gods themselves. Occasionally, batches are flavored, not for fun, not to please a wandering palate, but to honor specific deities. A touch of coca for Viracocha, the creator. A wisp of sacred flowers for Pachamama, the Earth Mother. These batches are guarded fiercely, brewed in deep, narrow-necked jars to concentrate their potency, then sealed and carried to temples with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for coronations. You shift your weight, your legs starting to ache from crouching, and wonder what it would be like to brew under that kind of pressure. To have every movement watched, every step a test of devotion. You like to think you'd rise to it, but another part of you, the part that loves the lazy chatter of a village brew day, the stolen sips and the off-key songs, knows it would drive you mad. A torch flares as a doorway opens briefly. You catch a glimpse of them, the Aklas, moving in careful lines, jars balanced on their hips, their faces serene and unreadable. One of them, a girl not much older than you, catches your eye for the briefest moment. Her gaze is steady, calm, but there's a flicker there, something quick and hot and unmistakably human. She looks away, the door closes, and the night swallows the light again. You stand, brushing off your knees, and take a deep breath. The Aklas will keep their secrets behind those walls, brewing their sacred chicha with the patience of saints and the precision of master weavers. And you? You'll head back to the noisy, smoky, gloriously chaotic world of village chicha, where the brew is sometimes too sour, sometimes too weak, but always alive, always real. You grin to yourself and turn toward the drums, the laughter, the life waiting just around the corner. Some brews are meant for gods and emperors. But the best brews? They're meant for everyone else. You follow the now familiar beat of drums, the low thrum carrying you back toward the village square. But as you step into the glow of the fires again, something shifts. The laughter is thinner. The music, quieter. The gourd in your hand, lighter. You glance around and find the reason soon enough. Strangers. They stand at the edge of the crowd, tall, pale-skinned, and armored in metal that glints dangerously in the firelight. Their clothes are odd, thick and stiff like they're prepared for a war the rest of you aren't fighting. Their faces are stern, unblinking. And their eyes, cold and appraising, roam over the village like they already own it. You swallow, the taste of chicha suddenly sour in your mouth. They call themselves Spanish conquistadors. You've heard the whispers, pass from village to village like smoke. Men from across the sea, hungry for gold, for land, and, as it turns out, for control. Historians still argue how much the Spanish understood about the world they were marching into, how much they saw and how much they destroyed without ever really seeing. One thing's certain, they didn't understand chicha. You watch as one of them wrinkles his nose at a gourd offered by a brave old man. He pokes it with a gloved finger, mutters something sharp to his companion, and waves it away like it's beneath him. Another strides to one of the vats, dips a metal cup into the brew, sniffs it once, and dumps it onto the ground with a disdainful grunt. The villagers watch, still, tight-lipped. No one moves. No one speaks. You clutch your own gourd tighter, feeling heat climb up your neck. The brew you spent days making, sweat, stars, prayer, memory, all dismissed in an instant, like spoiled milk. It's not just rudeness. It's something deeper. They don't just dislike chicha, they don't trust it. You heard the rumors. They call it a drink of devils, of savages. They say it poisons the mind, that it must be banned, wiped out, replaced with their bitter grape wine and strange dark liquor that burns instead of warms. You wonder, not for the first time, what kind of people would fear a brew that brings nothing but stories and laughter and soft, sprawling afternoons. But fear it they do. Soon enough, the decrees will come. No more chicha. No more chewing and spitting and waiting on the limb of the moon. No more offerings poured to the earth. The vats will be smashed, the brewing fires stomped out, the songs and recipes chased underground like frightened mice. Chicha won't disappear. No. It's stubborn like that. It will hide, slip into back rooms and quiet courtyards, ferment in secret where the law can't see and the old ways still flicker in the dark. You sip from your gourd slowly, never taking your eyes off the strangers. The taste is sharper now, tinged with defiance. The brew is still alive, bubbling quietly, stubbornly, just under the surface. Beside you, Juana shifts her weight and mutters low enough that only you hear. They can bend the gourd from the hand, but not from the heart. You nod. They'll outlaw it. Sure. And you'll brew anyway. You'll chew the maize and whisper to the stars. You'll stir the pots in darkness and pass the gourds hand to hand under the table. You'll pour a sip onto the earth when no one's looking. You'll remember. The Spaniards can take the gold, the land, the palaces of stone and sun, but the chicha? The chicha stays. It belongs to the maize, to the earth, to the hands that coax it alive. It belongs to you. You lift your gourd in a silent toast and sip deeply, the taste now sweeter than ever. The strangers turn and move on, their metal boots clanking awkwardly on the stones, out of place in a world that was never meant to fit them. You stay where you are, gourd in hand, firelight dancing on your skin, and drink to the stubborn, bubbling, unbreakable memory of it all. Later, much later, you find yourself crouched by a low wall at the edge of the village, a small gourd clutched in your hands. The firelight barely reaches here. The chatter and drums are distant, muffled like a dream you're already forgetting. Around you, a small, tight knot of villagers sits close, shoulders touching, heads bowed. No more boasting, no more clumsy singing. This is not a gathering for show. This is where the real chicha flows now, hidden, whispered, stubborn. You dip your gourd into the jar pass carefully between you, the clay cool against your fingertips. This isn't the grand vats of festival days. It's smaller, quieter, fermented under cover of darkness and worry. You sip. The brew is stronger than anything you tasted in the light, thick and sour and wild on your tongue. It tastes of secrecy, of rebellion, of a promise made under the unblinking stars. Historians still debate how the underground brewing survived, whether it was organized resistance or just the ordinary, unremarkable refusal to let go. You think it's simpler than that. People need what binds them, stories, songs, the sharp, familiar bite of chicha passed from hand to hand, thumbprint to thumbprint on the rough clay of a gourd. One of the elders leans in, voice low but certain. You brew in the dark, but you drink to the light. The others nod, and you nod too, feeling the weight of it settle into your bones. You pass the gourd, fingers brushing against the next hand. No words. No need. Around you, small fires flicker and die. The night wraps tighter, and the stars hang heavy above, silent witnesses to the stubbornness of those who refuse to forget. You sip again, slower this time, and close your eyes. You can feel it, the chicha's still alive in the jar, in your veins, in the dirt under your feet. The old gods might be quiet, but they're not gone. The maize still grows. The water still runs. And as long as there's breath to chew and patience to wait, chicha will survive. It'll be brewed in basements, in courtyards hidden by high walls, in pots buried in gardens where no one thinks to look. It'll slip into gatherings disguised as mourning feasts, wrapped in the rituals of grief no conqueror can outlaw. It will outlast kings, emperors, invaders. Because chicha doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to the hands that knead the dough, to the mouths that chew the kernels, to the patient waiters who watch the bubbles rise and nod, satisfied, at the right scent on the right breeze. It belongs to those who know how to listen, to the earth, to the water, to the ancestors whispering in the leaves. You breathe deep, the night cool in your lungs, and sip again. Somewhere not far off, a patrol clanks by, metal boots awkward on ancient stone. You don't look up. You don't freeze. You just pass the gourd, slow and easy, as if you have all the time in the world. Because you do. Chicha isn't going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever. Morning creeps in slow and silver, sliding between the cracks of your shuttered window. You blink awake to the low murmur of a market waking up, the creak of carts, the bark of traders haggling too early for dignity, the soft slap of sandals on stone. You stretch, the familiar ache in your arms and back reminding you of the brewing, the stirring, the endless lifting. Your head is heavy, but not with the reckless pounding of too much drink. No, this is the comfortable fog of a night well spent, a night stitched together with soft laughter and secret sips. You rise, tug on a shawl, and shuffle out into the new day. The festival square is quieter now. Ashes from the fire pits drift lazily on the breeze, and a few stubborn gourds roll abandoned in the dust, their owners long since stumbled home. But further down the hill, near the crossroads where merchants from all corners of the land set up their stalls, you smell it, chicha. Not the heavy brew of last night's secret gatherings. This is a thinner, fresher scent. Day chicha. Everyday chicha. You follow your nose to a cluster of market stalls, where large clay jars, potos, stand proud, their sides stained dark from years of brewing and pouring. Women in brightly woven skirts and men in wide-brimmed hats are already crowding around, trading a few coppers for a gourdful, sipping and bargaining in the same breath. Chicha, still here. Still everywhere. You sidle up to one of the stalls. The woman behind it, middle-aged, her face mapped with fine lines and the kind of smile that can cut through the sharpest morning chill, grins and sloshes a fresh gourd in your direction. You take it, warm and familiar in your hands. The first sip is sharp, brisk. Not the deep, heavy brew of ceremonies or rebellions. This is daily chicha, brewed light and quick, meant to quench thirst, to keep laborers steady in the fields, to grease the wheels of market deals. It's the brew of midwives and traders, of stonemasons and storytellers. You lean against the stall and sip slowly, letting the cool liquid settle your stomach and soften the edges of the morning. A few stalls over, a boy no older than 10 haggles fiercely over a bundle of maize, his gourd swinging from a loop on his belt. Further down, a group of older women sit cross-legged, sipping and gossiping between mouthfuls of roasted corn. Historians still debate how deeply chicha was embedded into daily life, whether it was truly a staple or more of a luxury. But watching the steady stream of people, the easy familiarity with which they lift their gourds, you know the truth. Chicha is life. You trade a few words with the stall owner, mostly about the weather, about the maize harvest, about a new recipe someone's trying that involves wild honey and promises to knock you flat on your back. She laughs, a low, rolling sound, and waves you off when you try to pay. Next time, she says, winking. You nod and take another sip. The market hums around you, loud but not rushed. A few dogs doze under the stalls, noses twitching in invisible dreams. Children dart between legs and carts, sticky with fruit juice, shrieking with the wild abandon only mornings after can inspire. You wander the rows, gourd in hand, and think about how far chicha has traveled. From sacred brew to outlawed drink, from royal table to hidden gatherings, from secret batches to morning stalls. It survived. It adapted. It learned to speak in whispers and shout in marketplaces. It's not the same brew it was 100 years ago, or even 100 days ago. It's changed. You've changed. But some things, the important things, remain. The gourd in your hand, the taste on your tongue, the quiet nods and smiles of people who know exactly what that sip means. You tilt your head back, draining the last mouthful, and sigh. Another day, another brew, another story tucked under your belt. Chicha isn't just surviving. It's thriving. The market hum fades behind you as you follow a familiar, rutted path toward the edge of the village where the old storytellers sit, nursing their gourds and their memories. You find a spot beneath a scraggly tree, the kind that looks half dead but stubbornly refuses to give up, appropriate company for what's about to unfold. Because where there's chicha, there are stories. Someone's already started, voice low and heavy with the weight of too many tales and too much brew. You settle in, knees drawn up, gourd tucked between your hands, and listen. The old man speaking has a face like sun-baked leather and a laugh that bubbles up from deep in his chest. He's midway through one of the classic chicha legends, the kind you know so well you could mouth the words along with him. It's the tale of a batch so powerful, so unpredictable, that it was said to have summoned more than just tipsy villagers. Spirits, ghosts, trickster gods with wild hair and wilder demands. Historians still debate whether these tales were metaphor, cautionary warnings about the dangers of strong brew, or earnest beliefs that the boundary between the living and the otherworldly thinned when chicha flowed too freely. But here, now, with the scent of maize and earth and with smoke clinging to the breeze, you don't see much of a difference. The old man leans in, voice dropping to a whisper, and the gathered listeners instinctively lean closer, gourds half forgotten. He tells of how the brew bubbled one night under a blood-red moon, thick and dark as sin, and how those brave, or foolish, enough to drink it claimed they heard voices in the wind, saw figures dancing just out of reach. Some say the brew turned their hair white overnight. Others say it granted them visions of cities made of gold hidden deep in the jungle. You shiver a little, not from fear but from the thrill of it. Because even if it's nonsense, and it probably is, there's something about the idea of a brew with that kind of power that makes you sit a little straighter, listen a little harder. When the tale winds down, punctuated by a long, theatrical sip from his gourd, the crowd stirs and chuckles. Another story, tucked away to be pulled out again when the nights grow cold and the gourds grow heavy. You drain your gourd and grin. It's not the only tale you've heard. There's the one about the brewer who tried to rush a batch, impatience, the deadliest sin of all, and ended up with chicha that frothed so violently it exploded, painting his entire hut in sticky foam and leaving him stinking of sour corn for weeks. Or the legend of the festival so wild, so drenched in chicha, that even the dogs forgot their manners and joined the dancing, tails wagging in time with the drums. Or the quieter, stranger tales, the whispered ones about brews that turned bitter overnight, as if the earth itself had taken offense, or batches that shimmered silver in the moonlight and disappeared before the first rooster crowed. You lean back, letting the stories wash over you, the steady rise and fall of voices, the occasional burst of laughter. Because brewing isn't just a recipe, a technique, a process to be mastered. It's a living thing, tangled up with myth and memory, with mistakes and miracles. Historians still try to untangle fact from fiction when it comes to chicha, how it was made, who drank it, what it meant. But you think maybe they're asking the wrong questions. Maybe the magic of chicha isn't in getting it exactly right. Maybe it's in the not knowing, the maybe, the what if. The way a simple brew can carry a village, a story, a dream. The old man finishes his tale with a grin and a bow, and the gourds pass around again, refilled and ready. You lift yours, the mazy scent curling up into your nose, and take a long, thoughtful sip. Maybe tonight your brew will be just a drink. Or maybe, just maybe, it'll summon a few ghosts of its own. You wander from the tree, gourd empty but heart full, the air cooler now as the sun dips lower, bleeding color into the horizon. The village hums quieter, too, as if the day itself is winding down, slipping into that soft, in-between moment before night really falls. But there's one more thing you can't ignore, the arguments. You catch it as you pass by a group of younger villagers squatting near a low wall, gourds in hand, faces flushed with equal parts chicha and righteous certainty. Fermented longer, one says, thumping the dusty ground for emphasis. The taste gets deeper, richer. Too long and it turns sour, another snaps back, sloshing his drink dangerously close to his knees. 2 days, max. Depends on the maize, pipes up a third, not looking up from the gourd she cradles in both hands like it's something sacred. Different maize, different time. You pause, smiling into your sleeve. Historians still argue about these same things, how long to chew, how long to ferment, what kind of maize yields the best brew, whether saliva fermentation was always standard or if it varied village by village, year by year. If the experts with their books and degrees can't agree, you're not surprised the villagers haven't settled it either. You crouch nearby, not joining in but soaking it up. The debate spins wider, clay pots versus stone, open fermentation versus sealed jars, spit fermentation versus sprouted maize. Someone even claims, wildly, that once, up in the mountains, they brewed chicha by singing to the pots, and the music helped the yeast grow faster. You snore into your empty gourd at that one. But maybe, you think, it's not about finding the right answer. Maybe it's about the arguing itself, the way it keeps the brew alive not just in jars but in minds, in mouths, in the spaces between sips. Tradition isn't a stone tablet hammered with final answers. It's a river, winding, shifting, carrying with it pieces of everyone who's ever dipped a gourd in and tasted what came out. You glance down at your own gourd, at the faint, sticky sheen left behind. You think about Juana and her patient scowl, about the Aklas behind their high, silent walls, about the warriors in their thick, unyielding brew. About the old women at the market, the men crouched over a bubbling pot under a moonless sky, the laughter, the prayers, the offerings poured to the earth. You think about the Spanish, their sharp glances and sharper laws, and how, despite all of it, chicha still trickles through the cracks. It changes. It bends. It hides when it must. But it never, ever breaks. One of the debaters, noticing you, waves a gourd in your direction. Well, what do you think? You chuckle, standing and brushing off your knees. You take the gourd, sip, and savor it, not too sour, not too sweet, rich and earthy with a hint of something wild that refuses to be pinned down. You lower the gourd, shrug, and say, depends on the stars. And the water. And whether you chew with your heart. A few snorts. A couple of thoughtful nods. The debate stirs again, slipping and shifting, finding new tributaries to explore. You hand the gourd back, pocket the moment, and wander on, feet finding the old, familiar paths that crisscross the village like veins. The stars are just beginning to appear, faint and blinking, like the first, shy guests at a feast you know will last all night. You tug your shawl tighter and smile. Let them argue. Let them sip and chew and stir and wait and wonder. That's how chicha survives. Not by finding the perfect recipe, but by never, ever agreeing that it's finished. You pause at the edge of the village, the night wrapping around you like a soft, familiar blanket. The stars above shimmer like spilled grain, scattered carelessly across the ink-black sky. The air is cool now, scented with earth and fire and the faint, sweet tang of fermenting maize. You lift your gourd one last time, the liquid inside glowing faintly in the torchlight. The taste is sharp, warm, alive, a brew born of patience, sweat, stories, and stubbornness. It's the flavor of countless hands working together, of nights spent whispering secrets under the moon, of traditions too stubborn to die. You take a slow sip, feeling the chicha slide down your throat, carrying with it the weight of everything that came before and the promise of what's still to come. Around you, the village hums softly, fires crackling, drums pulsing a steady heartbeat, laughter weaving through the shadows. The air is thick with memory, with the ghosts of festivals past and the dreams of tomorrow's brewers. You think back to the maize fields at dawn, to the slow, steady chewing that started it all, to the bubbling pots and the quiet prayers offered to the earth. You remember the color of the vats, the secret herbs, the first sacred tastings, the hidden gatherings under watchful eyes, and the vibrant, messy life that makes chicha more than just a drink. Historians may still debate, may argue over details and dates and methods, but you know the truth, chicha is not just history. It's a living thread, woven through time, binding you to those who came before and those who will come after. You tip your gourd toward the earth, a final offering, and whisper a quiet thanks to the stars, to the maize, to the slow, magical alchemy of it all. The night stretches on, wide and full, and you feel yourself settle into its embrace. One last sip, one last breath, and the soft, steady pulse of the world turning. The story of chicha goes on. You smile and close your eyes, the taste lingering sweet and stubborn on your tongue. The night deepens, the village quieting, and your breathing slows, sinking with the gentle rhythm of the land. The soft crackle of dying fires whispers a lullaby, carrying away the noise and bustle of the day. You feel the weight of the centuries, the hands that chewed, stirred, blessed, and drank, and it settles around you like a warm shawl. The stars above pulse faintly, watching over the fields where maize still grows under the same sky, whispering secrets only the earth can understand. The scent of chicha lingers in the air, a reminder that some things endure, quiet, patient, alive. You let the night enfold you, slow and steady, a breath held and released. The world softens, the edges blur, and you drift gently on the currents of memory and hope. In this moment, everything is at peace. Everything is exactly as it should be. The story is not over. It is simply waiting. Waiting for the next sip, the next breath, the next slow, stubborn bubble rising from the depths. Good night. Sweet dreams.